Hi, I'm Lisa Singer, and welcome to our new series with Media Post, and it's Insider Summit BTS, where I get to sort of pull back the curtain on some of the most influential women marketers in the world, really. And with me today is Micky Onvural, and she is the CEO of the menswear brand Bonobos. Hey, Micky.
Lovely to meet you, Lisa.
So nice to see you. Excuse me. You've always been on my radar. I mean, just for the summits, you guys are what you guys do at Bonobos is just amazing. But then as I'm doing more research and I'm finding out more about you, I'm like, you seem really cool. Like, you know what I mean? Like I see.
My children would not agree with you.
Well, they need to be looking at what I am. I mean, you seem to be almost fearless in a lot of ways with, when I hear you talking, or not hear, but read, although I have heard with some of your interviews. And also just looking at your career path. I mean, you got a degree in medieval language?
Modern and medieval languages from Cambridge. Yes, you know what? As a Brit, we like to call things by fancy names. My degree is actually in French and Spanish, but it gets dressed up as modern and medieval languages. I know nothing medieval, although, I mean, I read a bit of Chaucer as a child, but beyond that, I know nothing about that.
So, all right. So that at least kind of, goes a little bit all right. You're not too much off the track
Yes.
there, but you don't really stick to one industry, which I think is great. I feel like you really follow your own path. And I wanted to sort of ask you about that. Like, what draws you to a position, to an organization? And then talk about that from when you first started out till now, here you are as, CEO.
Yeah, totally. So, people often say to me, gosh, why have you done so many different industries? And I think some people see it as a positive, and some people are like, well, you can't really understand an industry if you're not sort of deeply sort of steeped in it. And I think that, my point of view is that actually it's a point of strength. I guess I would say that, wouldn't I? And why do I think that? I think a couple of things. It has really meant that I've built a muscle around understanding a customer from a sort of intellectual curiosity perspective. I never put myself in their shoes because I'm often not their customer. Like, I'm not the customer of Bonobos. And I can never rely on, well, when I was at this company, it was done this way, or we believe this about the customer. You always have to be learning the customer, understanding how they're evolving and changing. So it builds this sort of intellectual curiosity and rigor around the customer, who should be, and always is for me, the North Star. And it also means that I hope I am what I call intelligently naive, which is that I can be intelligent about a business without being, as I said, sort of stuck in the frame of reference around sort of why things are, a certain way. So for me, that sort of switching around of industries is a point of strength. It's not something I set out to do, but now I've realized that it's this point of strength. It's also something I love. Like, I just love learning new businesses and how they work, and really sort of turning them inside out to really understand them deeply. So that's sort of why I think, to the point about, my path to CEO, which again, I refer to as a happy accident, to be honest with you. I never planned for it. I've always followed my heart around, is there a customer problem to solve in a business that I can be passionate about and I can work with a team to solve in a unique way? That's sort of been my driving force from a business choice perspective. And then it's always been also about who am I going to work with, which I know everybody says, but really for me, I have to fall in love. And in fact, when I was offered the job at Bonobos, I was actually offered another chief marketing officer job at the same time. And, when I turned that offer down and took the Bonobos one, the CEO then said to me, why did you take this job over, the Bonobos job over the job with us? And I said, I fell in love. And I fell in love with the brand, the business, the people, the culture. And so I am very much driven by sort of instinct, as well as this idea of, is there a unique problem to solve? So that's how I choose businesses. I promise I will answer the question about the CEO thing, which is that, I didn't plan it. As I said, I came to Bonobos because I fell in love. I really enjoyed my time as the chief marketing officer. And then with the acquisition by Walmart, I had the opportunity to become co-president and really take on more of what I call the kind of go-to-market customer experience, which has always been where my passion lied. And that was, you know, a really amazing experience to do that for a year. And then after a year of doing that, when Andy, the founder and then CEO, said to me, you know, what do you think about becoming the CEO? I said to him, I need to think about it. I need to think about it for a minute. I need to understand for myself, do I think I can be successful at this? Do I think that I can bring a unique perspective? Do I think I can continue to foster the culture of the company? And ultimately, I decided, yes, I could, or I could at least give it a shot, which is why I took it. And, you know, in hindsight, 2020 and all that, I now look back and I say, you know, well, actually, if you're the chief marketing officer, you are the chief kind of champion of the customer, like, and of the brand. You know the brand story, you know the audience, you know how to talk to them, how to engage with them, how to motivate them to sort of shift behaviors. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the CEO is an extension of that. They have to do all of those things and be the kind of chief champion of the customer, but they also have to be the champion of the people internally and understand what inspires them, motivates them, energizes them. So they're more alike, I think, in some ways than they are different. And that's hindsight talking, but I think it's why, for me, it has been such an incredible opportunity, you know, to lead this brand.
Well, I'm curious though, because as CMO, you're much more in the creative thick of things, I guess, whereas CEO, yes, that's a part of what you have to do, but also, as you said, it's also about the organization as a whole. Maybe certain chances or risks you can take as a CMO. Maybe you have to sort of say, okay, the bottom line, we have to, you know, maybe those two hats don't necessarily, you know, they might duke it out a little bit sometimes. Do you find that, or
Yes, I mean, I think there's definitely times where, you know, I kind of have to switch hats, if you like, you know, a natural instinct to think about, you know, things in the way that a marketer does, which, you know, listen, let's be honest, marketers love to spend money. So, you know, I sometimes will think about it like, oh, we should invest in this. And then I sort of have to switch hats and say, well, what does that, you know, mean for the business and for the bottom line? There are definitely moments like that. I think that, you know, look, I'm able to switch back and forth, and I do actually use that. I'm putting on a different hat now. I'm quite often known to say, look, I'm going to put on my CMO hat or my marketing hat or my finance hat, you know, in conversations with the team. So there's definitely this back and forth. I think that ultimately, though, as CEO, I still get to scratch that creative itch every day, whether it's in the product we create, whether it's in the marketing we do, or honestly, even in the way that we think about the supply chain. I mean, I love to solve problems with creative thinking. And let me tell you right now, with the state of supply chain, you have to use creative thinking every single day of the week to ensure that you can still deliver the customer experience that we want at the end of the day. So yes, they sometimes sit in contrast to each other. And then I just do this sort of role play thing with myself, probably much to the amusement of the team.
We're creating Sybil here, you know.
Exactly.
Someone else to it.
I should probably rename one of my persona.
Micky and
Maria. I don't know, or Minnie.
The first
or
name
Minnie.
that came to mind was Minnie.
Yeah, or obviously.
Yes, of course. But I like yours better. So I do like, you mentioned at the top about, you know, one of your strengths, and I did see one of your blogs, and you were talking about, which I loved about it, is you were talking about, you know, all of your team, you know, everyone in the organization sort of has to name their, I believe, 5 top strengths or something like that. But also you talked about embracing your warts and all. And I think that's great, because it's not about, which we tend to do, I mean, people in general, but women especially, we want to change those warts, you know, those things that we sort of realize are maybe, you know, not the best things about us. And you don't want that. You want, okay, you know, push forward with your strengths, but also just accept it. And so one, I need to ask, okay, what's the number one strength for you, and what's the wart? And then how do you manage to, okay, I'm just going to accept that and not worry about changing?
Yeah, I mean, my number one strength is positivity. And, you know, I think, you know, if you were to read the definition of it through Discover Your Strengths, it is about the fact that I'm, you know, ultimately an optimist and a cup half full kind of person. I think that's what leans me towards this. Okay, I'm going to solve this problem. There's a way forward. There must be, you know, that kind of mentality, which is hopefully what I bring to the team, you know, every day. I think that, you know, my wart, and one that I have had to learn to accept, that the team would all tell you, is I'm incredibly passionate about what I do, which doesn't seem to be a wart, but I can get very emotional about things. And I'm actually teased by the organization for how much I cry. It's a very well-known fact. And earlier in my career, I really saw that as a weakness. And now I'm just like, you know what? It is what it is. It's just me expressing an emotion. And I think it was particularly problematic for me as a woman, that I felt like it was a sign of weakness. And now I'm like, you know what? It is what it is. It doesn't mean I'm any stronger or weaker. It just means I'm expressing an emotion that frankly could range from frustration, you know, tears of frustration, to, you know, true sort of sorrow and pain. There's definitely been moments of that too, when it's come to some people matters. But I think that's been the sort of the wart, which is probably partly the crying thing, but partly the like just like wearing my heart on my sleeve.
But I'm curious, not to interrupt, but when you had that, like now in your position, it's, you know, you're, you know, you're CEO, you know, if
Yeah.
you cry, whatever, it's, you're in a position where people know you've earned where you are, you earned your place, and you're their boss. I'm curious, when you were starting out, and by showing that emotion, as a woman, as you mentioned, did you run into anything, like any people, many men that you worked with, maybe that saw that as a weakness, and maybe
Oh,
almost
yes.
sort of pushed you like, okay, she's not good?
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you that very, very early in my career, it was actually a pretty formative moment for me. When I was working at L'Oreal, I was told by someone that I was working with that I had to leave a little bit of Micky at the door in the morning. And what they were saying was, you know, sort of hide your emotions, put on a brave face, put on your sort of armor, if you like, when you come into work, and be your work self. And for years, I really battled that feedback. And I definitely stood in my way at certain points, and in certain cultures and in certain organizations and with certain leaders. I think that when I came to Bonobos, and I think this is, you know, part of my success at Bonobos, I found in Andy a leader who really sought to understand me, and sought to understand kind of what drove me and how I operated, and to understand my strengths and understand my warts. And that gave me really permission to be my full self at work. And I think as a result, I think that's been a really significant driver of my success in my almost 5 years at Bonobos, was finding a leader that, you know, in this case was a man who was an incredible ally, remains an incredible ally to me. And it gave me that permission. And I think that now as a leader, I very much invite, and I hope enable and inspire people to do the same, to, you know, play to your strengths. Don't be scared of your weaknesses. Don't be scared of emotion, honestly, and don't be scared to be vulnerable. And that there's, you know, there's actually a power in being vulnerable, and there's a strength in it that we shouldn't be afraid of. And I think that that's always been a sort of probably a hallmark of my leadership over the last 5 years. And as you can imagine, in the last 2, that has been something that I think has served us well. Not just because I think that's a trait that I have, but I think that the leaders that I have brought into the organization demonstrate similar levels of sort of empathy and vulnerability.
Yeah, and it's almost, you know, you mentioned obviously the past 2 years. I almost feel like in a lot of ways, I mean, people are feeling a lot more with what's been happening, but also we're becoming more intimate with each other. We're having these
Okay.
calls where we're bringing everyone into our homes. We're,
Yes.
you know, we're seeing kids run in the background, you know, in the
Yeah.
beginning, you're like, you know, if you hear any noise in the back, whatever. And it's just like, and we've accepted that, and we really embrace it now. And do you feel like, I mean, it's almost made us a little bit even more vulnerable, but do
Totally.
you feel like that's changed you as a leader now, from, you know, now seeing that those aspects of your employees, you know, co-workers' lives?
I think that actually I have always been someone that's wanted to know the whole person and what makes them tick. I think that actually now it's just easier to do that. So I think that the fact that I see a kid or a dog on Zoom, or someone has said to me over the last 2 years, oh, there's this fire burning over here, or, the doorbell just rang, it's Fresh Direct, whatever it might be.
Right.
I think it's just actually made it easier to be that kind of leader. It's been easier to be that leader that not only can say, gosh, look at the chaos in my life, but can actually see straight into someone else's homes and see the other things that they're dealing with. And that has just enabled me to build, a deeper connection, I would say, with those individuals. And the other thing that someone said to me the other day about an upside of being virtual and being on Zoom all day, every day, it feels like, is that it's actually a slightly more level playing field, because there's no head of the table. There's no, and it was actually someone in our creative team, in the old days of the ad agency, the creative would be sat at the desk and the client would be looking over their shoulder, or the creative director would be looking over the shoulder. And it was a position of sort of strength and dominance. And what's so interesting in a Zoom world, there is no position of sort of physical dominance, head of the table, or standing over somebody's shoulder to look at work, or being sort of, the front seat of an audience, in a large meeting room. And I think that level playing field has been really, really healthy, for organizations. And I think particularly for more junior, individuals in an organization. And I embrace that, to be honest with you. I embrace that sort of flat hierarchy and that ability to engage one-on-one. And I'm rambling now, but we do a company meeting every Friday, every week. And, there's usually 120, 140 people on it. And it's really fun for me because I can sort of scroll through and I can say, hey, Danielle, what's happening with you this week, or I can scroll through and say, hey, Helena, how was Emma's ballet recital? I can flick through, and I would never have done that if I was stood in front of them in a large meeting room with 120 people.
Right. Watching the crowd.
And I think that's great.
Yeah. No, and well, I'm curious because I was wondering when you were saying how it sort of makes it a more even playing field.
Yeah.
When you talk virtually, do you find that the people who are in the lower level positions, the junior positions, that they're feel free to talk, or will talk more freely in this situation as in person? Just because I even find when we do these things called the roundtable, and the roundtables virtually, I have to kind of pull a little bit before they feel, it's almost like they want to raise their hand. They almost get a little bit more polite. And then with the roundtables in person, they're very much, want to just jump in with their thoughts and kind of, share. So I'm just curious what you're finding with your meetings.
Yeah, I think you definitely have to pull people out. I think it's easier for me to pull people out. It's easier for me to say, Becky X, or do you know what I mean? It's easier for me to do that when I'm scrolling through a screen in a gallery of faces. But I do think you're right that there's, there can be a little bit of reluctance to speak up. I think sometimes it's because people are afraid that they're going to talk over somebody else. Mm-hmm. And there's not the physical cues that you would see in a room about, oh, that person's going to start talking. I worked in video chat earlier in my career, and that was one of our biggest sort of revelations, was there's no sort of physical cue on video chat of when someone's going to talk, and then you talk over each other. So there's definitely, you have to pull people out. Yes.
Well, and when you talked about passion too, because obviously this past year, we sort of touched on it, has been really difficult. And I see how passionate you are in just your posts and things about inclusivity and making, not only for yourself personally, but you want to make it part of what the DNA is.
Yeah.
And, but how can you feel that passion? And as CEO, you have that power. One, as a CEO for a marketing, for a major brand, do you feel an obligation to be that voice, to sort of get out there and, obviously promote inclusivity, talk about, I know you had talked about Juneteenth and how, that was just amazing. And you want to make sure that it's not just another day for a cookout. Well, how as a, CEO of a major brand, can you do that? What would you suggest for other brands even? What do you guys need to do to step up, or is there even your place?
I definitely think it's our place. And I think that for a couple of reasons. I mean, I won't do it now, but you could go back through history and you could name all the brands and how they have shaped culture and how they've shaped cultural conversations. I mean, Dove is a famous example of that, you know, from sort of 10, 15 years ago, around sort of definitions of beauty and sort of the female body. So I do think that they have an opportunity to shape cultural conversations. I think the responsibility comes is, you know, you've probably read some of the same studies that I have by Edelman and others that show that, you know, the amount of trust the general population has in brands is often higher than they have in, you know, elected officials or in the government. And so they don't only have an opportunity to shape cultural conversations, but they have a responsibility, because actually they're the ones influencing people. And so that's sort of my point of view on it, sort of from a macro perspective. I think when you think about Bonobos and why is it so important to me to use, you know, my voice and the platform that's Bonobos to shape a conversation around inclusivity and diversity, is not only because I think that's the responsibilities of brand, but I also think it's important as an employer. I think it's really important that my team finds a place at Bonobos, not just a place to work and learn and you know, do great things and, you know, earn a good wage and grow and develop, but they find a place for them and a place of, you know, home and acceptance. And I think that that is what drives not just, you know, retention, but it's actually what drives loyalty to a brand from an employee perspective. They may leave, by the way, but we have multiple examples of people who've come back, and we have the most extraordinary alumni network. I mean, I think I may be the only CEO on the planet that knows as many former employees as current employees, and they may not have even worked at Bonobos at the time that I have been there. But it's this extraordinary culture that people really connect to. And I think it is because people have found their place with us and have found really incredible relationships that endure post working with an organization.
And you talk about your employees and bringing and starting within. And I feel like, you know, you guys maybe are, you're a disruptive brand. You have that, opportunity to be a little bit more, you know, just like your ad a couple of years back with the men defining
Both the definition, yeah.
Be bolder. You can be something that's a little bit not, you know, following what custom or what people are looking for necessarily, or what they're used to. There are brands that don't have that luxury, but they're still big enough. They're, you know, huge brands that need to kind of add that voice. What do you suggest bringing it from within? Do you suggest slowly, you know, bringing, you know, different content out there that sort of creates that? I mean, is there a way to everyone sort of be on that journey in some capacity?
Yeah. I mean, I would think that I would challenge the preconception that other brands don't have that luxury. Because I think my point of view on this is, yes, we're a disruptor brand, we're a challenger brand, but I believe that every brand should be a challenger brand, because if you rest on your laurels, someone will come up behind you, nipping at your heels, and they will disrupt you. So better to disrupt yourself. So I actually believe that everyone should be a challenger brand, and that there is, you're right, you know, a degree of cultural courage that comes with being, you know, a challenger brand. And I inherited a challenger brand, and I am very, very proud to continue to foster that. But I would say some of the largest organizations in the world could probably do with challenging themselves and disrupting themselves too, or risk sort of, you know, being less relevant or less successful over time. I think to answer your question about sort of where does that start? You know, where do you even start with this idea of sort of disrupting yourself? I do believe it comes from the inside. I've always believed, live it on the inside, it will show on the outside. And I've always believed that. But I think it's even more true today, you know, with, you know, whether it's with social media, whether it's with the fact that your employees are actually your greatest brand ambassadors, you know, all of those things mean that the wall between inside and outside is ever more permeable than it has been. So if you don't start with the disruption on the inside, frankly, it will fall flat on its face before it's even got out of the starting blocks, you know, on the outside. I also believe that, the other reason I think starting it from the inside makes sense is what I have found in my career, whether it was at eBay or Trulio or many of the great companies that I've worked at, that the truth of the brand and the thing that will make it be relevant across time, geography, space is in the DNA of the brand. It's right there. You may not have seen it for what it was. It may have got covered up by, years of, marketing or product development or cultural change, but it's right there. And so that's the other reason I think that, you have to sort of go on a little bit of a journey to find that nugget of truth internally, and then sort of, bring it to the fore, foster it inside, and then let it shine on the outside.
Right. And it's an investment, as you said, maybe
Oh,
you
yeah.
have that loss of sales or people or initially, but you're looking at it in terms of long term as not than just what's today.
And that expression, it's an Oscar Wilde quote, which is, better, hang on, I'm going to get it wrong now. Better to be, the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about. And so I do think, yes, there are things that, we have done as Bonobos that have been, polarizing. But actually, you know what, for the people who have loved it and have connected with that message, they are, fierce advocates and loyalists of the brand. And then honestly, there's the people for whom it's not relevant, and that's okay too. But I would rather be, loved or hated than be the thing that people are indifferent towards.
Yeah, no, I, as I said, I see that in anything I've seen about you and read about.
Yes, that is true. And I think that
quality.
And I think when I look at, other brands that I really admire, I think, they've taken a stance and, a point of view, and that's the brands that I gravitate towards as a consumer too. And I think, there's lots of big brands that have made brave stances, whether it's on sort of, social, economic, political matters over the last couple of years. And it's not easy, and you get a lot of flack. But as I said, I think the reward, there's a reward externally as well as internally when you take a stance.
Yeah. Well, I want to jump to a little bit, which is something is probably right up your alley, since you are, your strength is your positivity. So I'm sure you have a lot of those sort of silver linings, and not about this past year, which I do, like everyone I interview, I always try to end it with a silver lining, because I want to find that. I tend to be the glass half full person too. But in your life, has there been a time when you really just thought this is the worst thing ever, and then it turned into be really the best?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been thinking about this, and you're right. I have positivity as a strength, so I tend to be able to. I tend to be able to reinterpret many situations. Let me tell you, but there have definitely been moments. I joined a startup just prior to my time at Bonobos. Actually, the career opportunity didn't play out the way I thought it would, and I remember sort of honestly being very self-critical about, my decision making to join the company, and, what did I miss in, what did I not ask when I was being interviewed? Did I not follow my instincts? I was very self-critical about it. And so, and I left that company without a job, which, we're all told, better to find a job when you're in a job. And I remember thinking, oh gosh, what have I done? Not only I made a bad decision in terms of where I joined, but now I'm sitting here going, ooh, what next? And then, before I know it, I get the phone call about Bonobos. And I remember being told by the recruiter, who's a very dear friend now, he goes, it's a bit of a long shot because you've never done retail before. And here I am 5 years later, much to his joy, by the way. So there's definitely, you never know what's around the corner, do you? And, we can all plan our lives. And I think that, particularly as a woman who is, ambitious. I have 3 kids and the dog. I have a lot going on in my life. I like to plan everything.
And when you can't,
but the reality is happy accidents, are happy for a reason. And I think you just have to sort of be a little bit open to, it might not quite go according to plan, but you know what, something will, you know, sneak up and surprise you. And unless you lean into it, you'll never know whether it could have been the best thing that ever happened to you.
Well, I feel like you're someone who, if it's not working for you, and maybe as this job that you just mentioned is a perfect example, you don't just suck it up. You know, you don't just say, all right, you know what, I'm doing the right thing, I got to stay working. Or you want to find that better thing, even if it's not right in front of you. You want
Yeah.
the opportunity to, you just leave what's not good, you know, what's comfortable, what's good for you, or whatever that, you know, may be. And do you feel like that's something that you kind of continue throughout your life? Is this, you know, if it's not working for you, rather than just being miserable in that spot, you try to
Yes.
then go somewhere else, even
I am, one of my other top strengths is activator, which basically means that I like to be a catalyst for action. So this drives my husband absolutely bananas, I'll tell you, is that if something is not quite the way that I want it to be, I don't mean the cushions on the couch, but you know, something more important in our lives, I will be like, okay, let's make a plan. Drives him bananas. But I think it is, you know, for me, I've always believed in, you know, fail fast, fail forwards. So forward momentum, you know, learn from what's not working, and let's find a better way, and let's find a better solution. Yes, I probably don't stand still enough. Certainly he would say that.
No, I love that. I mean, I think that's, you know, life's too short. You got to just keep
Yes,
moving forward and doing
totally.
what you need to do.
Yeah, totally.
Well, my last question for you, which, you know, you talked about the different hats and the different industries, and, but so you sort of, but you still are in marketing. You're still a marketer.
Yes.
That's who
Yeah.
you are.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's say you can't be a marketer. That's
Tomorrow.
out of the picture. What would you be?
Yes. I'd be a chef.
A chef, really?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. There's two reasons, and there is a common theme here. One is I love to cook. I love the science meets art piece of that, the sort of creativity, physical outcome of what you're doing. But I also love people. So entertaining for me, having a group of people around the table brings me so much joy. Now, the problem is with being as a chef, you're not sat down at the table with them. And if you're going to make any money out of it, you probably had to do incredibly high throughput, which would not sit very comfortably. So I sort of think I want one of those restaurants where you only have, you know, 16 people a night, and you all sit down together and you have a conversation, and you share an experience, which is probably not the best business idea I've ever had, but it would be really fun.
Yes, more of a communal kind of.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, no, but now are you a good cook, and what's your specialty?
I think I am probably a good cook. My mum had a catering company when I was growing up. So I grew up around food and very good food. My speciality is, do you know the chef or the cookbooks, Otto Lengi?
Mm-mm.
He's it's sort
My
of
cooking
Persian
is
inspired food. He had a restaurant in the UK, you know, et cetera, et cetera. It's sort of Lebanese, Persian, a lot of sort of vegetarian pulses, preserved lemon and harissa and deliciousness.
wow. So it's obviously, which is something I've actually wanted to do, learn about different spices, like, you know, how to,
Yeah,
I use the same things, you know, and to how to, you know, you add one and it can change the flavor of another. I
totally.
really think that's such a, I would love to know.
And what's amazing about the way that Otto Lengi cooks is, honestly, there's a roster of probably 20 ingredients, puts it together in so many different ways, and it's all delicious, but all totally different. You know, a group of girlfriends and I got together for a weekend not so long ago, and I was cooking, and they were like, well, what a surprise, it's all Otto Lengi.
That's great. Well, at least that's, you know, so I know where I'll be making a reservation if that should happen. If you should,
there you go. I'll put you on the list
let me know.
for the least lucrative restaurant.
But the tastiest and
What a
most
great
fun.
experience. Yeah, exactly.
It's all about experience. Well, Micky, thank you so much. This was
My
really
pleasure.
awesome. I love getting to know you. So
Thank you so much for the time, Lisa. Take care.
you too. And thank you for watching. And again, we do this every week. So just keep coming back. And if you have someone you want me to kind of pull the curtain on, just let me know and I will do my best. Okay, thanks.